Today, from the global lane, the secret dark money network of leftist billionaires working to radically transform America.
Hundreds and hundreds of fake groups. They're just an accounting code and a website in a D.C. office.
Adele Raymer survived the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel. Now she's concerned about her safety while walking American streets.
Do I cover my Jewish star? Do I not? And that's not anything that I would think of, give it a second thought in Israel.
Pro-Hamas protesters and outside agitators arrested at Columbia U after breaking the law and spreading hate.
The reality is they have a huge image problem on their hands when they have, as organizers, students like Kamani James, who said things like he wanted to go out and kill Zionists.
And Free Palestine at Drag Queen Story Hour. And it's all right here on the Global Lane. Bill Gates, George Soros, and Jeff Zuckerberg. You may have already heard of these billionaires who fund left-wing extremist causes in the United States. However, were you aware that there exists a more powerful dark money network that finances radical political and cultural changes with even greater funds? Well, here to explain is president of the Capital Research Center, Scott Walter. Scott is author of the new book, Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. Scott, it's a pleasure talking with you again. So tell us, what is Arabella and why is it so secretive?
Let me take the second question first. It's secretive because the mainstream media doesn't do a very good job of pointing out that the left is the party of the rich, the left is the party of billionaires. They just won't do their proper work of exposing things on the left to anything like the degree they expose things on the conservative side. And then as for what Arabella is, picture a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you have Arabella Advisors. That's a for-profit consulting firm, PR firm, Beltway Bandit, they call them in D.C. It creates and operates the rest of the pyramid. In the middle of the pyramid, you have half a dozen nonprofits of different legal types, and that's where the money goes from the billionaires. They write checks to those places. And then at the base of the pyramid, you have what you see, what the ordinary American sees, and that is hundreds and hundreds of fake groups. Opportunity Wisconsin and Secure Michigan Elections, Floridians for a Fair Shake, things like that. They're meant to look like grassroots advocacy groups, right? Your neighbors. In fact, they're just an accounting code and a website in a D.C. office.
And one way Arabella worked to affect politics was during the Supreme Court nomination of Justice Kavanaugh and a group called Demand Justice. So tell us about Demand Justice. Why was it so hard to discover who funded them, and how did they try to influence the Senate confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh and I guess also Amy Coney Barrett?
Yes, they were set up just before Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. And in fact, literally just a couple of months before, the fellow who was creating this, one of these fake groups at the base of the pyramid, he went and made a pitch to George Soros and a bunch of other billionaires and centimillionaires that come together twice a year for a gathering called the Democracy Alliance. And he pitched his idea that we're going to create a group that will attack every one of the judicial nominations this administration makes. And he got a couple $1 million from Soros to get off the ground. The check was written to one of Arabella's mid-level nonprofits, the 1630 Fund, and bang, you immediately have this group that is organizing all of the left-wing groups to attack any judicial nominee. And as it happened, Kavanaugh gets nominated shortly after all this got started.
Well, in Chapter 5, you expose billionaire Warren Buffett's longtime support and funding of abortion and the groups that promote it. So tell us what you found.
Sure. Most Americans think of Warren Buffett as this, avuncular, nice old guy who's really good at picking stocks and companies. But sadly, he's also a billionaire who has put millions upon millions into one of those mid-level nonprofits at Arabella, the Hopewell Fund. And through it, he is, in fact, the biggest single advocate in America for the whole abortion agenda.
And you say that he's probably responsible for millions of aborted babies. What's the truth there?
Well, yes, and we certainly know that Hopewell has funded gruesome experiments in the third world. Because, of course, they don't just want poor people in America aborting their children. They also don't want people in the third world having children.
Well, what about politically? What about Donald Trump? What have you discovered about big money, Arabella's involvement in funding the prosecutors bringing charges against the former president? Is there any connection there?
There are numerous groups that got set up in the Arabella Empire with the sole purpose of trying to bring down the Trump administration. One of their methods was, FOIA requests, where you're requesting official records. Well, that, of course, is a legitimate thing to do, but they purposefully set up to send thousands of such requests in hopes of completely hamstringing entire federal departments' ability to function.
How about the big money funding of election changes? I'm thinking last minute non-legislative maneuvers like we saw in states in 2020 and 2022, also possible influences through social media, other efforts. What did you find, and what should we look for this election year?
Well, one of the more shocking things about Arabella is everyone will remember in 2020 you had the so-called Zuck Bucks. That was around $420 million from Zuckerberg that went into two charities, quote unquote, that then gave the money out to private election offices, very disproportionately in jurisdictions that Biden would win and needed big numbers, vote numbers out of. People tried to claim Zuckerberg was just helping election officials conduct election during COVID, but nobody pretends Arabella is anything other than a Democrat powerhouse. So if they were putting tens of millions of dollars into the same operation, it was absolutely a partisan operation. Now, sadly, they are still working with that same charity to this very day through a couple of their fake groups, the Institute for Responsive Government and the Center for Secure and Modern Elections. So they're still trying to manipulate your local government election offices.
Okay, we'll have to keep an eye out for that. There's plenty more in the book Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. Scott Walter, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Imagine sitting in your home enjoying a morning cup of coffee and suddenly terrorists armed with automatic weapons and explosives burst in, determined to kill or kidnap you. What would you do? Well, last October 7th, Adele Raymer was an eyewitness to the Hamas attack on her kibbutz. She miraculously survived. She joins us here in our studio. Adele, it's a pleasure to meet you. So I know you've shared your story worldwide, but tell us, just for our viewers who might not be familiar with what happened on the morning at around 6:30, October 7th?
We live about a mile away from the border with the Gaza Strip. So when you hear that red alert warning you that rockets are coming over, you have between 0 to 10 seconds from the second you hear the alert till the second you hear an explosion. So I was in my bed and I heard that alert. I ran to my safe room where my son was sleeping. He was visiting. And we started getting an enormous barrage of rockets. And we could tell right away that this was something different. We know how to handle ourselves with rocket fire, and fortunately since 2006 we've been having rocket fire, but this was so intense, and from up north above Tel Aviv to south of where we were, all at once, barrage, rocket after rocket after rocket, and after a while we got a message on the internal messaging system of our kibbutz that terrorists had invaded Israel. And this is not something that we had prepared for or expected for. We have a safe room, but it's built to keep you safe from rockets, not from infiltration.
Well, did you hear gunfire as they approached your home?
At that point, no. At that point, no. We got messages to lock our doors and windows and to lock ourselves inside the safe room, but the safe room does not lock. Only if you're pulling down on that handle does it lock in any way, shape, or form, providing that the person on the other side cannot force it open.
So did they just go away, or how did you survive that?
So they rampaged through my kibbutz. They cut a hole through the fence infiltrated the kibbutz, somewhere between 80 to 100 armed terrorists, and then I don't know how many unarmed, just people from Gaza who were told, come on in, loot, burn, destroy, do whatever damage you can. So not everybody survived.
Well, I was going to ask you that. You survived because of your safe room, but others at Kibbutz Nerim were not so fortunate.
Absolutely. 5 people on Nerim were slaughtered that day, and 5 people were kidnapped.
And you wear some, you have some that you wear around your neck here. Show me.
So this is my very close friend Judy, who is from the kibbutz next door, who was kidnapped walking in the fields. They're both in their 70s, walking in their fields on a sunrise walk. And they were murdered that day and their bodies kidnapped. And on my kibbutz, Yegev and Nadav were kidnapped with 3 other women, Nadav's mother, Yegev's wife.
Are they still hostages?
Another woman. So the 3 female hostages were released. They are still in Gaza, in the hell of the terror tunnels of Gaza, 202 days, together with 131 other hostages, innocent hostages of all ages that were kidnapped illegally, war crimes, and are still there.
And you're originally from New York City. You moved there in '73. Why did you move to Israel?
I was in Israel 72, 73 on my gap year and fell in love with the place. So when the October War broke out, I was already back in the States. But I said, well, Israel needs me. What am I doing here? And I made Aliyah. I went to live in Israel in December 73. I was drafted. I served in the army, and as part of my army service, I got to Nerim, where I am today. I've been there since 1975, and I just fell in love with the place, with the community, with the people. It's all about community. So that's why I'm there. And I do believe it's it's our homeland, and it's the only place that we can really be safe. So there was a major fail on October 7th. But still, we have our army, and they've learned a lot since October 7th.
Well, you said it's the only place where you could be safe, right? Here in the United States, we see all this anti-Semitism and the riots and the demonstrations on college campuses. It's spreading across the country. You'd be safer in Israel than in the United States right now, correct?
Not only would I be safer, but I also will have more of a sense of security, a sense of being protected. I walked out on the street here the other day, and I didn't know, do I cover my Jewish star? Do I not? And that's not anything that I would think of, give it a second thought in Israel. I know that I'm surrounded by my people, and my people have my back. And there are mistakes sometimes, and I don't always agree with what the government does, but it's my home, it's my people.
And once a teacher, always a teacher. A lot of young people don't know the truth about October 7th because they're on social media, TikTok, where they're getting a lot of misinformation. What would you tell them as a teacher if you had a chance?
Oh, they need to learn history. They need to learn history. There's so many tropes. What was happening in Nazi Germany in the 30s is repeating itself now. And if they don't wake up and learn about history and learn what happened then, we're going to find ourselves in the same place as we were in Nazi Germany.
Okay, Adele Raymer, thank you so much for joining us here at CBN and Regent University. We appreciate you. It's been a long journey. May God bless you.
Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Free Columbia. Nearly 2 weeks after pro-Hamas supporters set up encampments at New York's Columbia University, the NYPD moves in, removing and arresting protesters who occupied Hamilton Hall. Is this free speech or misconduct? Where are these protests heading and who is behind them? Well, joining us is Jonas Dew. He's a Columbia student and Young Voices contributor. Jonas is also editor-in-chief and founder of the Columbia Sundial Campus Magazine. Okay, Jonas, let's get right to it. What do these arrests mean for students like you at Columbia? How did it get to this point?
Well, I think what these arrests mean for the vast majority of Columbia students is possibly a somewhat return to normalcy. And I know that's a controversial thing to say at Columbia, even though, everyone on social media is condemning the police and saying this is not normal because they invited the NYPD onto campus. The reality is a lot of students are just here to study and they want to prepare for their final exams, which begin on Friday. So that's what I'll say about that. In terms of how we got here, it's been months in the making. It especially escalated in April after the Gaza Solidarity encampment got set up, nearly 2 weeks ago. And it's escalated ever since then. I mean, as the university has made clear that it's not willing to divest from Israel, the protesters have ramped up their tactics and continued to camp and continued to protest until finally they decided to occupy the historic Hamilton Hall.
Okay, Jonas, but the demonstrators say they've been peaceful. They only want Columbia to divest from Israel, as you mentioned. But are these protests at colleges and universities around the country more than that? What do you believe is the protesters' end goal here?
Well, first, I'll say that whether the protests are peaceful or not might even be the wrong question we should be asking, because a lot of things are peaceful, but they're still against rules and they're still against laws. And that's exactly what we've seen with the encampment and the protest. Yes, the occupation of Hamilton Hall was mostly peaceful, right? There was only a couple isolated incidents of force being used, but at the end of the day, occupying a building is still unlawful activity. It's still not within the bounds of free speech. It's not protected speech under any code of conduct. So that's the first thing we should be saying. And the end goals, I think they've made pretty clear. They won't stop at anything short of divestment. And what divestment means is any company doing business in Israel, especially with the Israeli government. So that includes companies like, Alphabet and Amazon, who have deals in Israel. It includes companies like Airbnb, whose, they host homes that are in settlements in the West Bank. But it also includes companies like Shake Shack, which is, we have a location right around campus, and they're like, boycott Shake Shack because they're opening locations in Tel Aviv, and they see Tel Aviv as occupied Palestine.
Well, the NYPD police commissioner says professional agitators are involved in these protests. So you're an investigative journalist. So what have you found out? Who's behind this?
Well, certainly there's been a lot of outside influence into this movement. Organizations like the extremist group Within Our Lifetime, which is run by, extremist Nurdin Kiswani, who was spotted on campus a week or two ago. It's also, New York Youth Palestine movement, right? All these other nonprofits. If you just go on the Instagram page, which is where they do most of their, communication. If you go to the Instagram page of, Students for Justice in Palestine, you'll see that almost every single one of their posts is in collaboration with a couple other accounts. And so it's undoubtable that they have been trying to facilitate the entry of people into campus, into the encampment. And there have been reports as well that there are people that were occupying Hamilton Hall that were not Columbia affiliates.
Well, the protesters say they're not anti-Semitic, yet they're singling out Jews. Pro-Hamas protesters blocked some Jewish students from attending class at UCLA. So how have Jewish students been treated at Columbia?
Not well, that's for sure. And the whole debate that's been raging on at Columbia is that the Columbia University Apartheid Divest, they're the sort of mastermind behind a lot of these, events and protests. They have consistently made attempts to assert that, no, what we're saying is not anti-Semitic, it's just anti-Zionist. And as proof, we have a lot of Jewish people that are supporting this movement, and Jewish Voice for Peace, for instance. And while there is some truth to that, the reality is they have a huge image problem on their hands when they host, when they have as organizers students like Kamani James, who said things like he wanted to go out and kill Zionists, right? These are just calls for violence. There's also people saying anti-Semitic things against Jews, for instance. And, as a result, they've had this huge image problem on their hands. And it's not clear to a lot of people whether or not they're truly being genuine when they say they're not anti-Semitic.
Well, quickly then, is graduation going to proceed without interruption? What do you expect?
I expect that it will, and I think that they'll be setting up for commencement very shortly. So that's something to look forward to.
Okay, Jonas Dew, student at Columbia University and Young Voices contributor. Thank you. Stay safe.
All right, thank you.
You may be familiar with the song If You're Happy and You Know It. It has recently been popularized in a Shriners Hospital commercial.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Now the song's been co-opted by the pro-Hamas movement. Not the music itself, but the idea with different lyrics. And not for your typical anti-Semitic pro-Hamas college demonstration, but for Drag Queen Story Hour for kids. And it's no longer if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Listen to this rendition.
If you're a drag queen and you know it, and you really want to show it, if you're a drag queen and you know it, shout.
This was a recent event held at Northampton Center for the Arts in Northampton, Massachusetts. And the host wasn't a Palestinian. He's Harris Kornstein, a Jewish humanities professor from the University of Arizona, known as Little Miss Hot Mess. What Kornstein fails to realize is that Hamas would never allow a drag queen storybook hour in Gaza. Islamic extremists persecute and kill drag queens and homosexuals. So be careful, Professor Kornstein, for what and whom you protest. You may be supporting those who want to kill you. And what about the kids? Well, they're not only indoctrinated in LGBTQ advocacy, now they're raised to support terrorists. What's next? Will they be taught to shout from the river to the sea, which actually advocates genocide against Israelis? How about kill the Jews? Oh, that's already being taught to young Palestinians by the United Nations. Folks, we've got to step into this battle for the minds of American children. Drag Queen Story Hour should not be funded or supported with taxpayer funds. And they definitely should not become platforms for indoctrinating children in extremist politics. Yes, Palestine must be free. Free from the clutches of Hamas terrorists. Let's continue to stand and speak out against extremist politics. And let's remember to pray for Gaza and the peace of Jerusalem. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on the CBN News and NRB channels, YouTube, iTunes, Rumble, Spotify, and our broadcast affiliates. And until next time, be blessed.